So a while back, we were given a Penny Isotopes lab to do. I am going to go through the lab and give you an opportunity to try to get more points. A lot of you didn't even attempt to complete it for some reason. Pre-1981, the pennies were made of copper. Pre-1982, or post-1982, they were made out of zinc. Copper's density is 8.96, and zinc's density is 7.13. So what we're trying to find is, in the different samples of pennies that they gave us, do we have a density closer to copper, or do we have a density closer to zinc? If it's closer to 8 something, it's probably copper. So you have more pre-1981 pennies. If it's closer to 7, then you probably have more post-1982 pennies. So the first thing you had to do, and I'm going to do this and show you everything you need to do. So make sure, the first thing you do, make sure up here, right here, you see that this says pre-1981. The next thing you're going to do is press play, right here, this little arrow. It's going to play for you the video. It goes pretty fast, but you can stop it. Okay? They want, what is the volume of pennies added to the graduated cylinder? Well, you have to see the difference. Where was the water at previously, and where did it end at after they got the pennies all loaded? The difference is the volume they're looking for in that answer. All right? The next thing, the mass of the pennies. You have to look at the mass on the scale. So if we go back up a little bit, they have just the mass of the graduated cylinder in water. So that's 71.112 grams. That's of cylinder plus water. Okay, now let's see what happens when they add all these pennies. The mass is now 240.77 grams. That's cylinder plus water plus pennies. So if you subtract those, you should get the mass of just the pennies. The next thing is the density. You could easily write your work right in this spot. If not, you have to add a photo and show me your work. You need to either type it in the box or show me a picture of the work. Remember, D equals M over V. So you have the mass from right there, and you have the volume from number 2. That's where you need to put the density. For number 5, go back up to your video. You need to click change. Click change. And when you click change, you will click on post 1982. Watch the video and do the same thing. You are finding the density of the post 1982. And again, show your work. You'll have to get your mass, you'll have to get your volume, and then calculate the density. So that was part 1. Part 2. I wanted period 1 to do trial 1. I wanted to do period 2 to do trial 2. Period 7 to do trial 7. And period 8 to do trial 8. These were the trials. Whatever period you're in, click on the correct trial. Tell me what trial you're using by just typing it in this box. What is the density of pennies in your trial? Well, let's look at trial 1 here. Look, there's the initial volume. Goes pretty fast. So they're doing the same thing they did in part 1. You'll get an initial volume, they'll add your pennies, the water will rise, same thing, watch the mass. You'll have to do subtraction of the mass. Same thing you did in the previous example we just talked about. And again, you will go over here and you will show me your work. If you're not typing your work in this box, you need to click that and take a picture of your work. Okay? Or I don't know if you guys are able to upload a file. Once you get the density in part 2, is it closer to your pre-1981 penny density from part 1? So maybe you want to go back and write that down. Or is it closer to this one from part 1? You need to go compare. Whichever one this density is closer to, that's what you put. Okay? Based on the density of your pennies, do you expect to have more pre-1981 or more post-1982? Well, that's going to be similar to your answer in number 3. Whichever your density is closer to, that's the one that you're going to have more pennies of. Okay, that was all easy. This next one, this is where you guys got a little bit crazy. So I'm going to help you out. So you know your density of sample is this right here. Because now you have an unknown sample. You don't know what you have. So I'm going to tell you specifically. You know your percent of zinc plus your percent of copper has to equal 100. Okay? They're asking you, what percent of the pennies in your trial are pre-1981? So that means the copper. So you're looking for your percent of copper. But before you find your percent of copper, you're going to have to find your percent of zinc. And some of you got this and some of you didn't, so I'm just going to write out the equation. To find your percent of zinc, which is post-1982, that's what that means. This is the equation. Feel free to write it down. 100 times density of your sample, and that's, I believe that was that number, let me go back and double check just to make sure. Yeah, number 2. So that's what you calculated, your number 2 in part 2, make sure you write this down, minus your density of your copper, that's your number 4 in part 1, and you're going to be dividing that by your density of zinc, which is your number 5 in part 1, minus your density of copper, which is your number 4 in part 1. There you go. So that's what they're asking. This is your percent zinc. Once you get that, take 100 minus your percent of zinc, and that gives you your percent of copper. Okay? That's how you find that. So everybody should get that right now. All right. Moving on, we have to lock, answer, and continue. They want you to find your percent error between your results and the actual percent composition. It's okay if you're off, it doesn't really matter. You know, this is just what we got. So remember, you did this before in your density lab. Percent error is your actual minus your theoretical divided by your theoretical times 100. Your actual value is from the chart. Your theoretical is what you calculated in number 5 in part 2. You will have to do this twice. You will have to do it once for percent error for zinc, and you will have to do it again for percent error for copper. Okay? And they give you both of these values in the chart. This is just comparing. Look at what your percent was. Look at your percent in number 5, part 2. Compare it to the chart. They're asking specifically about zinc. You can even put your percent of zinc and the actual, or I should, yeah, the actual percent of zinc. Which, was it higher or lower? That's all you're doing, comparing numbers. Okay? And then for part 3, or number 3, you're just trying to think about what could have went wrong. You know what you were doing. You know what you were looking at. See if you could figure out what possibly could go wrong. All right. So I will give you some time to complete this to try to get more points for your lab. I hope this helps. All right. See you later.